Welcome back to the Future Self podcast. Welcome to season 4, episode 1. Before starting this episode, I just want to highlight season 4 is going to be a little bit different to the first 3 seasons. I'm not going to feel limited by having to be in person in a studio as I am international for the next 3 months. And I'm also going to be using a little bit more, continued on from episode 13, my notes and weekly write downs on my phone. Today's episode is with an absolute legend of a human being, someone that I haven't met in person, but have talked to quite a bit online. His name is Marty Strong. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe, like the video. If you're watching on Spotify, turn that shit up. Let's get into it. All right, Marty, I just want you to introduce yourself to my future self audience, who you are, what you do, just kind of like what your vibe is.
Yeah, well, I'm Marty Strong. I have my own podcast. So I'm a podcast host of the Advantage podcast. I'm a CrossFitter. I'm not professional by any means, but I'd love to try and make the Torium Pro next year. That'd be lovely. And I do a lot of work for City Cave. So my parents own a few of them, which is a recovery and wellness space. And I think that has, had a large impact on my shift in mindset over time. And I guess that's pretty much me for the time being.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more to you that I know of. So we haven't actually met in person. We met once
Yeah.
without actually knowing it back at a CrossFit competition. But we've just done a lot of social media talking, a lot of just engaging and asking questions and whatnot. Now, I want to start off this episode maybe a little bit different to what you expected. I want to do 10 rapid fire questions. Okay.
Okay, go for it.
So you can't think about it too long. They can be yes or no, or just one worded answers. All right.
Yeah, deal.
So,
Sounds
number
good.
one, early morning or late night.
Early morning.
Number two, coffee or pre workout.
Coffee.
Number three, always easy or always hard.
Oh, that is a good question. I'm gonna go with always easy.
Number four, double Murph or a half marathon.
Double mirth.
Number five, what are you in one word?
Oh, fun, I hope.
Okay, that's good. Number six, only ever 30 seconds in an ice bath or 10 minutes every time you do it for the rest of your life.
30 seconds. 10 minutes is a long time to be in an ice bath.
Yeah, when I thought of that question, I thought, I wonder what your thought process will be about that. I'll ask you after because I want you to
Yeah,
also introduce
I'd,
the
I'd love to break these
biohacking
in.
factor of, yeah, what your enjoyments are. But I thought 30 seconds is almost too short for a
Yeah,
benefit, but 10 minutes is too long. So it'd almost be that
yeah,
agitation of what's the point of doing it.
yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
Number seven, biggest inspiration.
Oh, my mum.
Number eight, never do CrossFit again or social media.
Social media. Never do
No,
social media again.
number nine, be strong or be fit.
Be fit.
No, no mighty strong, not strong.
No, no. I mean, I'd love to be strong. I'm trying my best to be, but if I had to choose between fit or strong, I'd definitely choose fit.
All right. And then number 10, be the least in the room or the most in the room.
Oh, that's a really good question. I'm gonna say for now, oh, I'm gonna say the most.
Why?
Because if you're the least in the room, right, you're like evidently in a very, very good room with people that you can learn so much from. But is this like a perpetual question, like you're always the least in the room? Because that could indicate that you are always the bottom of the rung, and it doesn't actually necessarily mean that you'll ever reach, the middle or the top. Whereas if I can just say I'm the top of the room, then in my mind that puts me kind of in the future where I would like to be the top of some rooms. And it means that I have value to give. So if I had to choose
Love
between the two,
I love open-ended questions because the way you took that question could be completely different to the way someone else takes it. So I definitely thought of that perspective. The other perspective I thought of is you're always in a room where people are better than you, so it's motivating or it's
Mm,
driving for you to be better. Because I've it's that real typical cliche of if you're the best in the room, there's no factor of growth. Like if you're always flexing that you're doing better than people or you're always better than people, there's a less potential that you will grow because you're already top of the food chain.
yeah,
And I like how you took that because it is a very interesting perspective of the idea that, yeah, if you're always the bottom, then there could actually be something wrong with why you are always at the bottom. So that's
correct.
yeah, smart. Now, before I've got a bit of a bigger question after, but I want to link back to the 30-second ice bath or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So you're very interested in biohacking. It's a lot of your social media. It's a lot of your brand. I have a big feeling that it's going to be a lot of what you do in the future. As you educate yourself, you want to share that with your audience. And is that what you want to be known for in the future?
Uh, so I started off my, I guess, personal brand as biohacking. And I think that's because I have always, or at least, since I left school, been interested in optimizing my performance and doing that through things like infrared saunas and ice baths and breath work and all that sort of stuff, which I would classify as biohacking. And when I started, my podcast or I guess the brand, The Advantage, I really saw that there were a lot of people in my community, young people that were interested in bettering themselves as well and doing things even as simple as, wearing a whoop or optimizing their sleep. And to me, I was like, oh, that's biohacking. So these are all biohackers. But when I would talk to people, and I would ask them, hey, would you consider yourself a biohacker? Either they didn't know what a biohacker was, or they thought a biohacker was somebody that, tried to live forever or wore a lab coat and did crazy experiments on themselves. And I was kind of like, that's not really it. So I wanted to reshape what biohacking is. But since starting that journey, I definitely want biohacking to be a big part of what I do. But I think it's more just performance optimization because not all performance optimization is biohacking, but I would say that all biohacking is performance optimization. So it's a little bit of a broader spectrum.
Yeah, that's very fair. It is. It's interesting when you do niche yourself into something that is too tight, how limiting that can be. But also, adverse to that, if you are in something too broad, there can be a very dense pool of how many people. So, for instance, like podcasts, man, they're so saturated. Like everyone has a podcast, and I always love reading those quotes of the entry level to a podcast. We need to make podcasting gear more expensive because when you see it on TikTok or social media, how some people's podcasts either aren't doing that well, or they don't add value, or they're just like really generic. The thing with biohacking, can you just quickly explain what that is and, well, performance optimization? Because I don't want to then limit you to what you're not wanting to become. What is biohacking slash performance optimization, and what do you do in those categories that impact that area?
Okay. So biohacking is basically just having a knowledge of how your body works and being able to manipulate that using, any kind of product or technique or, so for example, with an ice bath, right? You use an ice bath to optimize your biology or to, I guess, hack your biology. And you do that in a lot of different ways. So one example that I can give is that when you go into an ice bath or any type of cold exposure, you can stimulate the production of brown adipose tissue, right? Which is just brown fat. So you've got brown fat and white fat. Brown fat is brown because it's really dense with mitochondria. And mitochondria actually is something that is used to burn fat, right? And produce energy. So if I'm doing X, which is ice baths, to manipulate Y, which is my brown fat, to do Z, which is basically produce more energy or burn more fat, then I would call that biohacking. And then I guess performance optimization is what I just said. That biohacking in that ice bath, that's performance optimization. But you can also look at other things that I don't think are necessarily under the spectrum of biohacking, like just training. Training is performance optimization. Learning to train better, learning to move better is performance optimization. learning to breathe, which is something that I've been doing recently, and it's surprising that a lot of people don't necessarily know how to do that. Learning how to eat, and yeah.
So, what do you do then under those categories? Like, what are the w- like what is it that you do in your life that falls under those two areas for yourself, for the betterment of yourself?
Yeah, okay. So I guess like the biggest one is the ice bath. So I've been ice bathing pretty consistently since probably 2018, 19. And now I do an ice bath every single day. I'm on, I think, day 80 of doing an ice bath every single day. So that is my main biohack. Outside of that, I also have an infrared sauna at home. So I do that quite regularly, not every single day, but probably at least 3 times a week. I'm in the infrared sauna, and that's really helping with things like detoxification and you know, getting more alkaline internal environment. Um, and then outside of that, I'm doing, yeah, a lot of, I guess, breath work, breathing, that sort of stuff. But yeah, to be honest, outside of those sort of main practices, and then my usual training, and then learning how to eat better, and that sort of stuff, I'm not doing anything that is too crazy. Like I'm not necessarily always going to cryotherapy or hyperbaric oxygen chambers. I'm not necessarily doing a lot of IV therapy or stem cell therapy, or even like I've never done any type of performance enhancing drug, but there are a lot of performance enhancing drugs and peptides that I would say come into biohacking, and particularly the longevity sort of section of biohacking, which is something that interests me, and I've listened to a lot of podcasts on it from Ben Greenfield, but I myself don't do a lot of that. So yeah, I guess my normal practices is just making sure that I've got my sleep right, making sure that I've got my diet right, doing that ice bath every single morning, training a lot, making sure I'm on top of my hydration, and yeah, doing the infrared sauna.
What makes you differentiate for yourself? So I'm not having you quote this as an education for other people to necessarily follow. I guess there's less liability when you talk about personal experience. What allows you to differentiate what's bullshit and what's actually helpful? So, for instance, like the idea of an ice bath, I'll hear over in Australia, 3 minutes is the most optimal. When I was in Spain, I heard that 10 minutes was ideal. Now I'm in Bali, I hear people saying 40 minutes is, really good to push yourself to do those levels. Like, how do you differentiate for you what's optimal for you, or how would you find what's going to be the best choice to make? Because there's so much misinformation, or there's so many perspectives and inputs that everyone wants to have. So when it comes to you, how do you work out what's the best ones to choose and what's the best length of time or way to go about it?
Yeah, so I think for me, it's I listen to the people that I want to listen to. Um, you're right, there's so much misinformation out there, and that carries over with absolutely everything. And you get a lot of people that are like, oh, you need to listen to the professionals. Oh, this doctor did this doctor said that, right? But at the end of the day, like we've been misled by doctors and health professionals time and time again. Um, so I think the biggest thing is, okay, if I really respect someone's opinion because of the things that they've shown me, whether it's through social media or maybe they're a local coach that I know personally or something like that, and they say, "Hey, you should try this," then I will absolutely try it. And if I try it and I like it and it works for me, I think that's the biggest thing. If it works for me, then it is something that I'll consistently implement. Um, Yeah, I think that mostly answers the question. But actually,
Yeah.
hold on. Um, Going back to how do you determine what's real and what's bullshit? At the end of the day, if it works for you, it's real, right? And I think that kind of comes down to the placebo effect, or whatever. Maybe I'm getting the placebo effect every single day when I do an ice bath and I get out and I want
Yeah.
to run through a brick wall. Maybe there isn't any. I know there's actually science to back it, but if there wasn't any science to back it, guess what? I'd still be doing it, right? So at the end of the day, if you read a study somewhere, let's say you pick up a men's health magazine and they say, hey, you should do an ice bath for 10 minutes every single day. That's the optimal. We've just done X, Y, and Z study. You're not actually going to go read the whole study, probably. You're just going to take that headline and say, I'm going to go try that. If you go do an ice bath for 10 minutes and you feel fantastic and you do it again and again and again and you feel fantastic every time, then it's good practice. It doesn't actually matter if, new science comes out the next week saying, hey, you should actually do it for 2 minutes. If you would rather do it for 10 minutes, do it for 10 minutes.
How do you balance the pressure of doing the right things come time you want to do, in quotations, the wrong thing? So what I mean by that is, if you're focusing every day on eating clean, eating healthy, raw foods, grass fed, but then all your mates want to go out for takeaway, or if you're doing all these performance optimizations, but then it's an event and you want to celebrate and drink alcohol, how do you balance the guilt between putting in all this consistent work? Because one thing I always notice when it comes to optimization of performance and training, it takes so much more work to progress it than it does to regress it. So, for instance, you could spend months and months progressing your sleep, mouth taping, nose taping, the right lighting, black shutout blinds, all those things, and then you could go and get fucked up one weekend for a birthday party, and that's thrown out all that hard work and the weeks and weeks of work you've put into it. How do you balance, I guess, the guilt or the pressure of always having to be perfect, because optimizing that performance means you're pretty much on most of the time? How do you allow yourself to go off or stray off that path a little bit?
Okay, so first of all, I feel like you need to be very, you need to really sit with the consequences, and you're right, like the amount of work that you've done, right? Um, so I have not always been perfect on my game of training and health and fitness and biohacking and all that sort of stuff. It actually was quite recently that I was being a very naughty boy and going out a lot and drinking a lot of alcohol and doing a lot of extracurricular activities. That was like 2 years ago. Um, yeah, fun fact that the not last Torian Pro, but the Torian Pro before, the first time Bailey made it, I went out on the Saturday night, so there was still Sunday competition, and I was in the stands hungover as fuck on Sunday watching Bailey, and that was a massive turning point moment for me where I thought this, I don't want to be this dude sitting hungover in the stands. Like I want to be the guy down there on the floor. So it was a massive misalignment. And first change there was you need people around you that can hold you accountable to actually what you want. If you're constantly surrounding yourself with the people that are always like, hey, let's go out for dinner, let's get on the bags, let's drink alcohol. If you're always surrounded by those people, you'll always do that stuff. And it will be so much harder to be that lone wolf and say, no, my goals are bigger, right? You might be able to have that kind of discipline, and I actually would back that probably in any friend group you would be able to do that. But for anyone else listening, if your friends are taking you away from your goals, they're not the friends that you want to have full time. Then I guess the next thing is language, right? You need to lead with language, in my opinion. So it is so important to say I don't, right? You don't just want to stop at saying, oh, maybe I'm going to try and not do this, right? Like with alcohol, for example. It was earlier this year. I was sitting at a cafe with one of my friends, and I just had this idea come into my head because I was like really starting to get on my goal of like, oh, maybe I could make touring in a year or something like that. Maybe I could take CrossFit a little bit more seriously. I was just brewing on this as we're at a cafe, and I had the idea like alcohol is getting in the way. I'm not drinking alcohol a lot, but I don't want to find myself in the position where I'm going out with friends and they're like, oh, just have one, and I have one. I don't want to be in that position anymore. So I had the idea and I was like, I'm not going to drink for the rest of this year. Right. And I just said it out loud to him. I just said, okay, I'm not going to drink for the rest of this year straight away. Right. And now it's just something that I say, I don't drink. Right. Will I ever drink again? I have no idea. Right. Maybe I will. Maybe it'll be in a year. Maybe it'll be in 10 years. I'll drink again. But right now I say, I don't drink. So when I go out, I don't have that temptation. I don't have the thought come across my mind because I say, I don't drink alcohol. It's the same with right now I'm not eating any processed foods, right? Will I ever eat another processed food or will I ever eat another donut? Maybe I will. But I say I don't eat processed foods. So if I'm out and there's processed foods, already in my mind, I have said with conviction, I don't eat processed food, so I'm not going to do it. Um, Now, the last part of your question there was kind of like, what do you do when you want to have that little bit of enjoyment, right? Because you can't be perfect all the time. I think you just have to pick your times and really, again, sit with your progress and like the effect that whatever you're about to do is going to have on that. So if it's let's say it's a donut. Let's say I haven't eaten any processed foods in 2 months, and there's a donut that I really want to eat with my friends. It's someone's birthday, and it's their birthday donut cake, and they want me to have a slice, and I think I want to have a slice. Realistically, that's not going to have a humongous impact on my life. And if it's something that I really want to do in that time, then so be it. I'm going to do it in that time, knowing that the other 99.9% of the time, then I'm on point. Um, but yeah, I hope that was an adequate answer to your question.
This episode is brought to you by the Future Self book. This is a book that I wrote at the back end of last year with my 5 years worth of self development and future self knowledge. It's a 30-page book, interactive, linked in with some of these podcast episodes. If you are interested, I'll link it down in the description below. It is an ebook. Let's get back into it. Yeah, that was unreal. The biggest thing I like that you said in that is language. Language with the business I run is always something I educate individuals on, because the way you speak are the opportunities you create to be a potential. So I'll always say, I'm never late. And that will automatically have my brain in time finding opportunities not to be late. Whether that's waking up earlier or that's getting there way before I need to, my brain is slowly developing to see the pathway of the opportunity of never being late. But when people say, "Oh, I'm usually on time," there's no solidification for their brain to hunt down being on time, because they've kind of accepted they kind of are, kind of aren't. It'll allow their brain to make choices that could also have them be late. So it's the same thing of when people say, "Oh, I can't push that heavy," or "I don't push that heavy," or I can't run that far. It's like, well, if you solidify that you can't, you have cancelled out any opportunity of ever being able to. Even if it's a bit delusional is another topic I love talking about, like thought process delusion, which makes sense to you but not to other people. Even if it is delusional to say I'm going to be really fit, if you're really really unfit, your brain will start to find opportunities to allow you to become fit. And that's just something I think, yeah, language is absolutely massive. One important question I wanted to ask you is, do you think being great is at a disadvantage if in your life you have no major struggle? Now, just to preface why I asked that, so many people I know that are either killing it, thriving, big businesses, really fit, doing well, high achieving, they've come from a background of struggle. And one of the hardest things I've always thought about and never vocalized to anyone, because some people say, "Oh, I want to live the way you do," or "I want to have the personality traits you do." And I reflect back on where they've come from. And so many of those beneficial aspects I have now have come from absolute hard times or complete shit experiences, borderline trauma based responses. And it's a hard thing, because I don't want to say that those who don't go through hard things can't be great, because they very much can. But there is a very unique pattern of those who are hyper successful or doing quite well that have come from struggle or a history of challenge. Do you think there's a disadvantage of greatness if you don't go through something that's challenging?
Absolutely. Like, show me greatness without struggle, right? Like, I'd love to say you could show me material success without struggle. Like, I guess the most recent example would be that Hawk Tour girl. Right now, she's like,
Yeah.
she said Hawk Tour on an interview, and now she's probably rich and famous, right? But like, would you really associate that with greatness? That's just clout. If you look at truly, like, give me 5 examples of greatness, like, LeBron James, um, Usain Bolt. These are all sports people. I don't know the other
Yeah, yeah,
greatness. Even look at, Taylor Swift, right? I don't really like Taylor Swift's music, but like, she's, I guess, one of the greats in pop music. Um, but like that is associated with immense struggle. Um, yeah, and I think, I've obviously had my own struggles, but if we just keep it as simple as possible, like doing CrossFit, you have to struggle if you want to reach any, even semi mediocrity. You have to go through a lot of struggle, particularly in CrossFit. So, yeah, I honestly don't think that there is any such thing as greatness without struggle.
So the reason I asked this is, and whether you want to talk about it or not, I haven't confirmed with you, and we can or can't. That's completely up to you. Is there's so many similarities in you that I have myself. And this is
Mm,
why I don't know if it's because of a similar upbringing or childhood, or if it's from pure chance. But I like another thing I do want to talk about is why a life of CrossFit, one of the hardest fucking sports there is, why a life of 5 a.m. ice baths, why a direction of a podcast, of posting on social media, like they're not normal things. Now, I'm not saying that we're weird and
mm,
abnormal, but comparative to majority of society, they're not the most normal things to do. But you do them, I do them, and both of our upbringings were, in a sense, similar. So, do you feel like you do what you do now? You try as hard as you try now. You do those different, challenging type things because of what life was like for you growing up, or is it just you just randomly enjoy it, or you just chose to do it?
that's a good question. I guess, okay, so if we're going to talk about my childhood, so I didn't have a bad childhood, particularly from, ages sort of 10 up. My life was all right, but quite early on, my parents split up and my dad got arrested. Well, like my biological father got arrested when I was probably 7 or 8 years old. Um, did some pretty gnarly stuff, like burned down some churches and was pretty crazy, realistically, actually a crazy person. Um, so I think I had to grow up really fast. Um, and I think a big part of that was I actually got asked recently, like, was there a moment that you felt like you became a grown up, right? And I
Mm.
remember this so distinctly. Um, Coming home, like the day that my dad got arrested, and there was, police cars on the driveway. I was in year three, I think, and just falling to my knees and really realizing that, like, my parents, or at least my dad, right, probably the closest uh, human example that I have to God, right? You think that they're like a superhero, you think that they're perfect, they can do no wrong. And then in this one moment that all just comes crashing down and you realize like not everything is necessarily as it seems. And I feel like that's always kind of stuck with me. That like I almost don't like trust any scenario at any point because I know at any moment like it could all come crashing down and be completely the opposite of what you think. So I guess like that was a big part of I guess my upbringing. But like I always loved sport, and I feel like when I was a kid and all the way through high school and all the way through to now, like movement and sport and competition and that sort of thing was always my outlet, you know. And I think that more recently it's become even an emotional outlet. There's very real science to say that if you are feeling sad or upset, you know, doing some kind of movement will boost your endorphins and dopamine, so you will have a positive emotional response. But yeah, for me, like whenever I get hit hard in life, like I'll find myself in the gym. And I genuinely enjoy the times where I can channel those difficulties and negative emotions into better performance in the gym. You know, I think it's a good outlet to have. And yeah, like I guess I also just don't want to live the normal life. You go through school and you're sort of almost like fed this script of how you're supposed to live life. You go through school and then you go to uni and then you get a job and then you get a wife and then you have kids and then you pay for this and then you and then you retire, and then you can go traveling. It's just like, fuck that, man. Like, I don't want to do that shit. Um, yeah, particularly sitting in an office all day. Like, I love moving. I love the sun. I love learning, and I love like choosing the learning that I get to do. I don't necessarily want to just always do what somebody else says and give them the most crucial hours of my day, every day of my life. So I guess that's why I'm sort of right now grinding to sort of try and make something out of CrossFit or the podcast or a brand or something like that. Um, because yeah, I want to try and create my life rather than just
Mm.
be a part of someone else's.
So I quoted this on one of my last episodes. The origin of the hero and villain come from the exact same situation, but it's just based on the individual's choice on what they do.
Mm.
You're not and again, I like that you did state that your childhood wasn't bad, because I wasn't trying to preface that either. Like, I don't know if you know much of my story, but my father passed away when I was 12, and my childhood wasn't bad either. Like, my mum fucking killed it, my stepdad killed it. I had a great childhood, but an event like that has an impact, of course, on you long term, such as you with your biological dad too. Why have you chosen a life of, in the sense, light over a life of darkness? And what, like, something so small for some people could set them down partying, drugs, crime, just getting by. And not to say that you didn't have those periods, because definitely growing up for me, I'm not going to say that I was always future self and perfect. Like, I probably hit all the partying, drugs, and those things earlier than a lot of people. But why choose the life of grinding, wanting better, not wanting average, when you realistically have enough reason to have chosen the complete opposite?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know. I don't think there was ever a time when I was really weighing up like, oh, should I go dark or should I go light? Right? Like
Yeah.
I think it was always just like the natural progression for me to sort of like strive for better. And I think like a big thing that I realized pretty early on, I think in high school there were definitely some times when I would say like I probably battled with a little bit of depression, right? Not gnarly or anything like that, but I felt deep, dark feelings, right? And then on the flip side, I felt happiness and I felt connection and I felt love. And honestly, like so much of that was actually spent playing sport with my friends or like going to the gym with my friends. That was where I really found that like light and happiness. And so I think I just, intuitively knew like that's the direction I want to go in. Like when you felt darkness and when you felt happiness and you associate, okay, what makes me feel happy and what makes me feel dark and down and
Mm,
unhappy, you should naturally take the things that make you feel happy and better. It's unfortunate though that some people probably just haven't had enough of those experiences to know what that
the
feels like.
difference. Yeah, that's one of the biggest things I mentally struggle with to conceptualize and understand, is that people don't realize life can change so simply from a choice. And like, being a coach, part of my role is to allow someone to understand and to educate, because I've never been that David Goggins type motivation where it's like, bro, you could just one day wake up and choose to change your life. But realistically, like, that's how simple it could be. And I always struggle with the fact that I know that so intensely and I understand it so easily. But some people really struggle with that concept, that they don't think they could change their life, or that there's so much more to it. But if you have lifestyle based depression, meaning not chemical, but as a result of what you're doing, smoking, drinking, sleeping in, scrolling, all those things, you ultimately could one day wake up and just choose not to do it. It can be that simple, but it's not. And it's not for majority of the population. And I almost pull my hair out on the idea that, why the fuck do I know that and understand it so easily? And why do so many people struggle with that idea? Now, this is a little bit left of what we were just talking about. We'd probably agree, right, that 4 seconds isn't that long. Yeah, we can agree on that.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts then on the idea of being a 1 minute and 58 second person compared to being a 2 minute and 2 second person? Now, what I mean
Oh,
by that is, for instance, an ice bath. I always challenge myself to be a 2 minute and 2 second person, because the idea of 1 minute 58 seconds, there's only a 4 second difference. It's not that much, but the difference between those two people is fucking astronomical in my thought process. What do you feel about that? What type of person are you, and like what are your thoughts or comments around that?
Oh, bro, that is one of the best questions I think I've ever received in my whole life. And it's funny because I've definitely been both of those people. I can't
Yeah.
lie and say, hey, I'm always the 2 minutes and 2 second person. No, sometimes I am absolutely the 1 minute and 58 second person. And I think it really comes down to, for me, also, um, in the gym, right, when no one's watching, like, are you going to do all the
Mm,
reps or, all that sort of stuff? And I've definitely been the person that hasn't, and I definitely have been the person that has. I think it really just comes down to like the way you speak to yourself internally, right? There's, you kind of have to lie to yourself, right? Because in my opinion, you're not always going to be that super strong Goggins type of person. And realistically, the difference between 1 minute and 58 and 2 minutes and 2 seconds is massive, massive.
yeah.
Not necessarily in time, but in mindset. Um, there's been times, if we're talking about the ice bath, there's been times when I have just wanted to get in the ice bath for almost as long as possible, and I want to make it as hard as possible. There were some times earlier in the year where I was going through some stuff and I was unhappy, and like I said, my outlet is kind of doing these hard things. So usually I set a timer, I start some music, I get in, I dug my head in, all that sort of stuff. But this time I was like, no, don't put. I was with my friend Frank. He comes in the ice bath with me most
Oh,
mornings.
shout out
I don't
Franco.
Yeah, shout out Frank, shout out Frank. I was like, don't put the music on, right? And I got in, so no music, so I've got no distractions, and I just moved around the whole time. So when you're in an ice bath, you create a thermal layer. So like if you're
Yeah.
staying still, it feels quite warm. If you move around, you lose it, and that like just makes it exponentially harder. But you get out and you just feel so much more like accomplished and ready to go. Yeah, and then same thing in the gym. Like there's times when I'm like complaining a lot. I look at the program that I've got to do with Bailey and I'm like, bro, this is fucked as if we're doing this. Like, I don't want to do this. Can we, like, make it a little bit easier? And there's other times when I'm like, in my head, I'm like, you have a goal to hit. You have to go the distance. And, like, the extra 4 seconds is going to be the difference between first and second place or making it and not making it, right? You have, if you train yourself to always go that extra, 4 seconds or extra 2 seconds and do the extra stuff, then when you're back against the wall, that's when it's going to come out. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a
I always treat it
fantastic question.
I appreciate that. I always treat it like tax, right? So again, it's the same idea. You can put in well, it depends if you run a business or not, but if you run a business, you can put just under how much you're supposed to put away, or you could put just over. So when it comes time to pay the tax, you have enough money stored up. And it's the same thing as you just said, right? When it comes time to showcase the work you've been putting in, that difference will show up. I I remember when I used to train CrossFit with Max Lee, he's like my best mate, and he'd set 4 rounds on purpose. And I would be fucking crawling to the fourth round. And then at the end of the fourth round, I'd be like, thank God I'm done. And then he'd go, all right, one more. And it's just that
Mm,
idea of being able to do that extra. Came time, the next time I did the workout, I was like, yes, I can do 5 rounds. And then he'd add on a six. And it's always that pursuit of, it might feel like unnecessary struggle now, or you're putting in unnecessary work, but it's always going to pay its returns. It's even the difference linking back to the ice bath, shoulders above the water or shoulders under. Like
mm,
that difference of 3 or 4 centimeters isn't that big, but it actually mentally will return a, a massive, massive difference. When it comes to training, and again, share it if you want to. If you don't want to, that's okay. In those times when it's really, really hard, in Murph, that last 1.6 kilometer run, on the air bike, the last 10 cows, when you're doing, a barbell cycling workout, the factor of picking it up one more time, the last 30 seconds in an ice bath, what do you think about? What do you tap into in your mind? Do you tap into some dark thoughts to push you over? Do you tap into some, oh, you just got to do it? Like, what are the things you tap into when training gets really hard to push you over the line?
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, right now I have sort of like a positive goal. Like I said, like I'd really love to make touring, right? So it's great at Bayfit. We've got now Bailey's name up on the wall and Matty Gilmore, who's another athlete that made touring from our gym, up on the wall. So like I can sort of look at that sometimes, and my internal dialogue is like, how bad do you want it? How bad do you want it? You know? So that really helps me now if I'm ever absolutely in the hurt locker and I just need to give 101%. I can sort of just say, how bad do you want it? But there's definitely been times when I've like, you know, dug into some negative thoughts and that sort of thing, or just yelled at myself, don't be a bitch, you know?
I love the idea of how individual it is for everyone. So, for instance, there's an inspiration based motive to get there. I remember when I talked to Max before, because some of my thoughts are super fucking dark. Like I'll think about things such as like, um, it's your fault what happened to your father, which is such a weird thing to think about, but that will allow me to push that extra bit. Or I'll think about, if you don't finish this workout, you're going to lose everything in your life and be fucking homeless. Or like, I'll really tap into some dark, negative thoughts, but in a positive way because that helps me. When I've talked to Max before, I've asked him, "Oh, well, like, what do you tap into?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't know, just like, just finish the reps." And I always find it so interesting how individual it is, person to person, what your motives are, but there is a need for something. So
Mm.
like I might think of that to get to the position of finishing the workout. Someone else might need something else, but everyone needs a little something, I guess, besides fucking Max to push them, to push them over the line and to finish what's needing to be done. Now, how did you learn to enjoy something that in quotation marks is hard? Because one thing I always notice in the work I do and the clients I work with, a lot of what we're doing is exposing over time, learning to enjoy what's tough. Because me compared to someone that's overweight, the only difference is I enjoy what's hard because I know what the returns are. They might not understand that you put in hard work, you get a return, or they might just not enjoy it. And learning to enjoy something that's hard, obviously, is one of the fucking hardest things you can do because, again, it's hard to do. How did you learn to enjoy the hard things? Ice baths, CrossFit, pushing yourself in social media, being vulnerable, getting out there, all those types of things.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think particularly with CrossFit, like it's just always hard, right? Um, but ways to make it a little bit better is, yeah, realizing the gains that you're going to make, but you kind of have to make them first to actually see that and to really associate that. I think the second thing is having friends around you with similar goals, like whatever that is, right? So I think that I've found friends, even like yourself, right, through social media and stuff like that, and people that can kind of like push you, and you can ask them questions, and you can go through the same kind of struggle together. Like struggle is not struggle if you're with other people that are going through the same thing, in my opinion. Um, so yeah, that's probably the biggest thing is finding other people with a similar goal.
So then to step and add on to that question, using people or working with people can be beneficial, but then how did you learn to become someone to do the hard things without the reliance on other people? Like realistically, you've been doing 75 harder, an extension of 75 hard, waking up really early and an ice bath, and I think it's 2 workouts a day is what you're doing. You're not doing that with someone every single day. How did you learn for yourself to become a person that does the hard things or the things needing to be done without the reliance or gratification from another person?
Mm. Yeah, like I said, I think it's more just like learning or realizing the progress that you make, um, or like really sitting with why you're doing it. Um, and I think yeah, it's hard. It's hard to just go out and do some hard shit if you've never really done hard shit before and
Yeah.
do it on your own, right? But when you start with something that's not overly difficult, let's say a cold shower, right? You might not be someone who exercises a lot. You might be someone who doesn't do ice baths or anything like that. But you can start off with a cold shower. And you start off with 10 seconds. That's going to be something you have to do on your own. Then go 15 seconds, then 30 seconds, then whatever. As you're going up, you'll probably start to feel the effects and you'll realize why you do it. For me now, genuinely, like I'm doing an ice bath every day, but I'm not like, sure, it is hard, but I couldn't imagine my day without. I would feel tired. I wouldn't feel energized. So I know, like, okay, like this is a hard thing, but I absolutely have to do this because it feels so good after. So when you start doing things like that and exercise, you know, exercising versus not exercising and feeling the effects of the difference, that's when you start to really just lock in and do all those things. But like, if you are somebody who is not doing anything hard at all, and you don't think it's something that you can do on your own, that's when I'd say get an accountability partner. Find somebody else who's in a similar position, or find somebody who's where you want to be and try and just latch on to them.
Mm. So yeah, yeah, accountability partner is a good thing, or a coach or a mentor. Yeah, again,
Or
something.
yeah, coach mentor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
along the lines of that. Now, a massive part of my branding, or my brand, is future self. So that ultimately is delayed gratification. It's about doing something now that benefits you in the future. So it's like an example is you don't have to put away your tax money, but you still have to pay your tax at the end of the year. So you've enjoyed spending all that money all year, and then come tax time, you're absolutely fucked. Delayed gratification is about not spending as much over the year, putting it away, and then come tax time, you breezy just you're able to fork out what you need to. What in your life at the moment demands the most delayed gratification, or what's the biggest sacrifice you're making to have it pay off in the future?
Oh wow. Yeah. There's a few, but I would say the training and the CrossFit. So I had a corporate job until earlier this year, and there was a few reasons why I stopped it. But basically, it was a lot of travel. I was already traveling probably 2 out of the 4 weeks of the month, and they basically wanted me to go up to 3 or 4 weeks. And I was just like, I just can't manage the travel. It's taking me out of my routine, and I feel like I'm a routine kind of person. And then particularly when I did quite well in the open and quarters and thought maybe I can do a little bit better, I decided to quit and pursue CrossFit a little bit more. So now I'm working a lot less. I'm earning a lot less money than I was, and I'm training every single day, twice a day, for multiple hours with people that are better than me, Bailey O'Brien. Um, put myself in the hurt locker, and realistically, like that is, I'm gonna have to keep doing that for a year. You know, if I want to really make something out of the CrossFit. I think as well, like, posting on Instagram pretty much every single day, that is hard. Like
Oh,
making
dude.
filming the videos, making the videos, actually putting them out and putting myself out there it's a difficult process. And it's scary, but hopefully altogether I can build a strong personal brand around performance optimization and being your best self.
Your engagement, like credit to you, because your engagement on the gram is really good. Social media for me is one of the hardest things. Like I have two TikTok channels, I have a YouTube, I have two Instagrams, I have, and then Facebook too. Like it is just demanding, and each platform gets one or two pieces of content minimum per week. But I'm at that point now where it's so fucking hard, tiring, and taxing. The only thing that's not is my personal Instagram stories. I absolutely love being on the stories every single day. But yeah, I've had to invest in one of my clients who's an insane photographer. He's coming over to Bali for 3 weeks to sort it all for me. Like take videos, take photos, put it all together. So all I now have to do is be who I am in a third person rather than it being a selfie. It's a photo taken, which I think aesthetically for me looks better. And then
Mm,
ultimately just upload it. So I remember talking in the weeks leading up to us booking this in, because time zones and all that shit, we had to reschedule and fucking everything
yeah,
else.
yeah.
You had a story about comparison you wanted to explain or talk about. So go for gold with that.
Yeah. So basically, you always hear those quotes like comparisons to the thief of joy and that sort of thing, not to compare yourself to others and yada yada yada. It was when you sent me that photo of both of us standing on the podium at
Yeah,
Benton.
yeah.
I realized who you were. And it's funny because, like, way back in the day, I used to be into a bit of bodybuilding, right? And you were into bodybuilding and you were quite ahead of where I was, but I'm pretty sure we're like basically the same age, or like you might even be younger. I think
I'm
you're younger
22.
than me.
Yeah.
You're way younger than me. I'm 24. So
Yeah.
yeah, I remember like coming across your gram and you were like, sponsored by AHP and doing all your bodybuilding and stuff like that. And
Yeah, yeah.
I remember thinking, fuck this guy, how's he doing this shit? But I just thought it was really funny because, yeah, I remember like seeing your gram regularly, and I didn't follow you, and every single time it like bothered me because you were like basically doing the things that I wanted to do, right? And I just think it's funny now that like I guess we don't necessarily have a solid relationship, right? We're just more Instagram friends, but I can't wait to meet you in real life. But
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
think it's funny how those things sort of come full circle.
It's yeah, I posted something on my story today, or I think it was yesterday, that so many people see other people succeeding as a negative light, and not
Mm,
necessarily negative like that's a bad thing, but it can create envy or a bit of jealousy or fuck, like they're doing what I want to do. But the mindset that they're doing what I want to do, that's sick. It's possible, is just something I
mm,
wish so many more people would tap into. And I've definitely been that
yeah.
person where I've seen someone else and envied them and gone, fuck, why do they have success and I don't? But that mindset would have been so much more useful. The one of they have success in what I want, so it is possible. And I just,
Mm,
yeah, it is funny you do say that though. I think as a kid, I always was second of something. So I grew up with a really wealthy family. I adore that family. So around the time of my father passed away, they looked after me. I stayed at their house. They were buying things for me. All of this, they just covered me with everything. But I was always second because they were wealthy. You know, they always had the better skateboard or the better bodyboard or the new thing, and I always had either the second hand or the hand me down or the shit thing. And I feel like as I got a little bit older, around that 15, 16, when I found the gym when no one else was doing it, I became a little bit addicted to the idea of being able to do things that other people weren't doing. Or I liked the
mm.
idea of being better than people at things. So that's why, yeah, I'd get onto it early. So social media, I'm still fucking trying to figure it out because it's an absolute bitch to grow sometimes. But yeah,
Yeah.
doing the things that other people aren't doing to be able to say, yeah, I'm doing it. So traveling, working, my own business, those things. So yeah, it is really funny you said that. But then also the full circle moment of the CrossFit thing is me and the partner I had at the time won that. But then now I don't really do CrossFit and you're fucking killing it and so much further ahead of than where I was. So it would have been funny if back, or it would have been interesting if back then that was a limiting factor of, oh, fucking hell, these people are always ahead of me. I'm going to stop. Had you have stopped, you wouldn't be where you're at now versus now. Not that it's a competition or anything, but you're so much further ahead of me. And it is interesting how that idea loops around. Now, like I said before, I love my potty episodes to be around the hour mark.
Yeah.
Coming from you for my audience, what's something, whether it's a quote, a thought, or an idea that you want to say to my audience, whether you want people to think different or question themselves on something, like what's something you want to leave kind of this episode to finish off with?
Yeah. Okay. Um, I think you know what when we were talking about the lead with language, I had an extra idea, and I'll throw it in. And I'm actually keen to do one of my own podcast episodes on this, so I hope it is valuable. Um, but it's a thought that I had that the only way that humans can layer intention onto vibration is through speech, right? And I think that it's pretty interesting when you look at the Japanese rice experiment. Have you heard of the Japanese rice experiment?
No, no.
So the Japanese rice experiment is you basically get like 2 cups of rice and you put them out and you speak positively to one and negatively to another, right? And it is actually interesting. The one that you speak negatively to will go moldy much faster. You can do the same thing with a plant. The one that you speak
Yeah, yeah.
positively to will grow a lot faster. And it's interesting because plants and rice do not speak English. They cannot tell what language you are speaking. So if we did the same experiment, but I taught you Chinese and I taught you Chinese wrong, I taught you like Chinese backwards, and you started saying negative things to one and positive things to the other, but it was reversed, I guarantee you'd get the same results. Like the ones that you're layering the negative intention onto, even though you're saying positive words, I guarantee you it'll still go moldy, right? The one that you're speaking positively to, right? Even if you're saying negative words without realizing it, that positive intention is going to cause it to grow. Um, so I think, yeah, leading with language is massive, but it's not just the words that you say, it's the intention that you layer onto the vibration will create that. Like that to me is manifestation. Manifestation is speaking things into existence. Like it's so interesting, right? I don't know if you're religious, and it doesn't really matter whether you are religious or not. If you look at like Christian religion, it's so interesting that out of all of the different construction methods that they could have used in the story of Genesis, God spoke the universe into existence, right? Like he didn't build it, he didn't put it together, he spoke it
Mm.
into existence, right? That's the earliest example that we have of manifestation through speech. And God created us in his image, so I think we have the exact same power to manifest things through speech.
Marty Strong closing off that podcast. Fucking, that was unreal. Yeah, I love how you just finished that. Now you have your own podcast, which it's the early days in it, but it looks fucking unreal. So I'm definitely going to link that down in the description below, as well as your social media too. Bro, I appreciate you joining this episode. This is actually the first episode of season 4 too. So you're
Oh,
the
let's go.
premiere, yeah, the opener of this one. But I appreciate you coming on so much. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It was a good chat.
Fuck yeah.